Hello and welcome to episode 187 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I am first Dragoon 1701, and I give my life for the Founders. And I'm here with my second, third, and fourth, and they can fight over those positions. Markhawkman, Greendragoon, and DuncanIdaho.
Tardigrades are life.
I claim third.
So obviously, we had big announcements this week. The first detail drop for the expansion number 4, Victory is Life, and so we're going to be talking a lot about that. But a couple things real quick first. Season 14.5 is coming up very soon. I'm thinking possibly not this coming Thursday, but the next Thursday is my impression that it's going to be. What we know is coming with it is the Constable specialization, which is a little bit DS9 themed as well. It's going to be basically abilities and things that will happen the longer you have somebody targeted, which is interesting.
It's one of those things where I was kind of thinking about it, and it might be one of those specializations that it's definitely going to be good for bosses in PvP, but I'm also thinking if you've got a character that's a little underpowered, this might help. Because
yeah, exactly.
You're going to be you're typically in a longer engagement, and you could use that little bit of a boost, and proportionally it's going to help you a lot more than some other more limited, and also just sort of less straightforward specializations, because this one is pretty, it's like you deal more damage, and you get armor penetration, and okay, it's all good.
Yeah.
So...
Well,
I was thinking
was how we have a lot of enemy groups in the game where you're fighting this big old alien battleship, and it summons this swarm of minions that try to surround you while you're fighting it. With this specialization, you could target the boss enemy and then basically just ignore the minions and kill them with AoE damage even faster than you would otherwise.
Someone pointed out to me that according to the wording on the blog, and I haven't checked if this is true because it is on Tribble for testing, that you don't actually have to be shooting at the person to get them to activate these powers. You just have to have them targeted.
Yeah, no. So it is definitely, you have to have them targeted for 4 seconds, and then the Nemesis status triggers. So it could potentially work for Romulan while cloaked, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, because it is a large update, there's always the possibility of Foundry downtime.
And we do know
if they add
new code
Foundry doors, there is guaranteed to be Foundry downtime.
But probably guaranteed, but it might be short because we've had some very, very short ones recently.
Like the last one where we didn't notice there was Foundry downtime. It just like I logged in the game like 2 hours later, and it's like everything's published.
Yes, blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah, so one of those things, it's like we could actually have a auto republish, but you might not notice. But even still, once we have that happen, do check your missions.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Always. All right, so let's that was the pre-dinner salad. Let's move on to the meat and potatoes. Okay, so earlier this week, they released all kinds of information. Or at least let's call it the very first tidbits of information on Victory is Life. It's coming in June of 2018. They did have a little bit of a trailer that doesn't really reveal that much.
Which I actually have loaded up.
Oh, well, play it. Roll the tape.
If the legends are true, we must deal with this threat head on. For there is no honor in retreat.
But yeah, That's an interesting trailer.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like maybe it was referencing the battle that we've actually already fought in the last featured episode.
I think so too, because I don't know how many times they could get away with destroying DS9.
Yeah, I think once is enough.
Yeah, so it could just be that it is like, and especially too with the well, actually, when was the Enterprise F damaged to the point where it had to be refit? Was that Iconian War?
Probably.
I'm just trying to remember the J.
If I remember right,
I think something like that.
Didn't Mikkel Sean kamikaze the Aquarius because the rest of the ship was inoperable?
No, that was the fluid.
Surface tension.
Surface tension. There we go. I was thinking fluidic something. No, that was against the Undine.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
It was basically one of those background things where they incorporated into the lore blog for why the Yorktown got
Midnight, I think.
It was in Midnight, but they didn't really deal with it that much. But it was a Jason's Interstellar blog talking about the refit of it to the Yorktown. But I'm just wondering if they were sort of referencing that there, if it was in the Herc Attack, and it was like, no, there's Iconian War. But at any rate, though, I think the trailer may not be sort of geared to people who are actively following the game now, but may have lapsed, and it's just trying to draw their attention to the fact that we blew up DS9.
Or it may be that there are some reality-altering properties at work.
One thing that we don't know is whether anything in this expansion will involve the prophets.
Yeah.
But it remains a possibility. I mean, if we're doing DS9 themed stuff,
actually make one comment about that, namely that we will probably have the ability to travel through the wormhole to get to the Gamma Quadrant.
But we may or may not have an encounter with the prophets. I honestly think we probably will with the cameo actors, because it just comes up. It's an opportunity for them to have more lines and just say weird stuff.
Well, I mean, like the one time we talked direct to the prophets in the game, what did they have to say to us?
Well, mysterious stuff. It's actually 2 times, because it's in the revamped DS9 arc when we're trying to figure out what was going on with the orb that belonged to the Mirror Universe.
Oh, yeah.
And then also in the 2800 arc.
Well, in the 2800 one, I can remember that one pretty clearly. And it's basically just reuse of people who did other roles for NPCs in the game.
Yeah, and they could pull the same thing off here. It kind of depends on how the missions will play out, and we certainly don't have any information on that.
Now, if you recall, in the old Alpha Quadrant missions that have been removed from the game, we actually did go into the wormhole and, fly around in it.
We saw that as a Foundry map.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that quite well, because a certain mission that Heathen Dog knows used it.
And an interesting thing about that particular one, though, is that the prophet said absolutely nothing. So I don't know.
Well, so that's the prophets for you.
Yeah, nothing so far indicates the prophets, but I would not be surprised.
You never know.
Yeah.
Obviously, anyway. they were a big part of DS9, and if Cryptic wants to go there, it's certainly within the theme.
Yep, and it's certainly good use for the 10 new voice actors coming up.
We do, yes. We have new voice actors. So we got Renee Aubergenois, Armin Shimmerman, Nana Visitor, Alexander Sitting, and Andrew Robinson, and those are the ones that have been announced so far. And Martok will be returning. And for some reason, people seem to think there are hints of Jeffrey Combs. I don't know where you're getting that from.
So this came from a Twitter post by Luke Critter, who basically said something along the lines of, I would be so happy if Jeffrey Combs and Andrew Robinson were added to the game. This was before they announced Andrew Robinson, and Salami Inferno came back with, well, if it makes you happy, we'll absolutely do it.
Oh, and Kale joked that he's like, Salami's in my office right now, please help me.
Yeah.
Demanding this be done.
So, and it's also one of those things
so what they've done is, though, they have released this picture, which has blacked out silhouettes for the ones they haven't announced yet, so people are speculating and guessing.
Yeah, one thing we do know is that there's 10 people who did acting in the TV show that will be having voiced lines in the expansion.
Mm-hmm. and this includes Martok, who we've obviously already had. So there's 3 yet to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not necessarily 10 people who have never done voice work in Stowe before, but it's 10 people who did who played roles in DS9.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting Nog and Lita in would, those would be pretty nice ones. Although I'm still holding out hope.
You know, what would be really cool.
To be honest, though, I don't really see the benefit to them for hiding it if it's Nog or Lita. Because Lita's done a whole lot.
I think probably the ones they're hiding are new actors.
Yeah.
So
my hope out of the like, assuming that Jeffrey Combs is in, because he'd be my number 1, but my number 2, Colin Meaney.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm iffy if they would actually get him, but it would be cool if they did.
I would. There's one that I'd like that obviously we've already had the voice actor around. I would love to see Tony Todd do Jake Sisko.
That'd be a good one.
Because, obviously he did the older Jake Sisko in The Visitor, which is a fantastic episode. And it seems like Jake would be around that right age.
It'd be a little bit too old for him, wouldn't it? Well,
to be,
I don't think so.
Like, he was kind of older age.
Jake would be in his, 50s probably, or getting close to that.
He was really old in that episode.
Maybe even 60s.
Here, guys, one quick thing. My Stowe's acting up. I'm logged out and I can't log back in.
That's
I'm just doing a network test. So go on.
We angered the prophets and they made you disappear.
I'm gonna have to do network tests. So anyway,
well, we'll keep going with talking about the expansion here. So we do know that there were going to be 6 new missions, which is about on par with what we had for Agents of Yesterday. And if you eliminate the patrols, that's about on, it's getting close to what we had for Delta Rising as well. But obviously the biggest thing for this expansion is obviously the new Jem'Hadar faction.
Yeah.
Playable Jem'Hadar.
Of course, they haven't told us what else is in will be playable yet, so speculation is running rampant.
Oh, is it ever? But one interesting thing about the Jem'Hadar is that they're going to start at level 60. Which is something that a lot of games do when they get to this point in their life. They'll want to start people closer to the end game, or at least allow people that option. World of Warcraft has done it a couple times with like Death Knights and the Demon Hunter, that sort of thing. But in this case, we're going to start with level 60 Jem'Hadar, and they will have they will be caught up in some way with reputations, spec points, DOFs, R&D, that sort of thing.
Well, not necessarily all of them, but some of them.
Yeah, and they didn't completely... they didn't say exactly what form that would take.
Actually, Borticus hinted that they haven't decided exactly what you're going to get yet.
Yeah, and it's all this is coming out in June, so they do have quite a few months to fine tweak things. So
yeah,
I suspect that even internally, a lot of the stuff is going to change for the fine details. So yeah, we'll just have to see how this stuff works out when it comes to the final implementation. But it is interesting to get that level 60 faction, just because it is kind of just sort of a nice change of pace if you want to create a new character versus having to go through the grind again, because it's one of those things where it's just like, well, I want to make a new character, but at the same time, I don't really want to go through all the introductory content again. Well, here's actually a new option.
Also, it will probably be a faction where you get, at the very least, one Jem'Hadar ship for free.
Yes, they kind of confirmed that on the stream without really confirming it. They said
some sort of starter ship.
More than 0, but fewer than 2 was the exact wording used.
Well, and I mean, the other thing that they haven't said, which you absolutely know they're going to do, is do a big pack of ships.
Yeah. Well, we did get a glimpse into what we think is going to be one of those ships.
Yeah, they some promo artwork they provided to one of the media outlets and then they also put it up on the stream, showed a new Cardassian ship.
Yeah.
Also, if you look at the original file name that it had when it came from Cryptic, it is labeled a flight deck cruiser.
Interesting.
Ah,
I think it looks quite cool myself.
that's a good one to start off a faction with. Just
To be
'cause we
honest,
don't-
though, that is exactly what I would expect a Cardassian carrier to look like. So, hey,
yeah, it's got that broad base. Yeah,
it looks
I
like a
think that's-
fish.
Basically, it looks like you took a Gaylord and added extra room for hangars.
Yeah.
Yep.
That one's tempting. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because we have Cardassian ships coming. We've got some number of Dominion ships coming, and I'm really excited to see if Cryptic does well. They'll probably do this, but an original Jem'Hadar ship, because the ones we have are all
I expect they will do several.
yeah, and those could be quite interesting.
Because they'll want to fill out the roster for a Jem'Hadar ship, or for Jem'Hadar players, so that they can have dreadnoughts and cruisers and on down the line.
Yeah, and just as to reassurance for people, if you already have a Jem'Hadar ship, that's not going away.
That would be just silly.
I mean, it's possible that they will simply just make different ones. I mean, how many different bug ships have they already made? Adding 6 or 7 more, yeah, whatever.
And it's kind of the way to think about it. It's like the Tal Shiar adapted ships before the Romulan faction came out. Hey, people can have, or while the Romulan faction was out, so Federation and Klingons can technically have a Romulan ship, and you can do some more Romulan ship things, but at the same time, it doesn't.
And I've seen people, complain about this. It's like, I already have this, and I spent a lot of money on it, and it's like, well, if they made a Jem'Hadar attack ship, much more accessible only for the Jem'Hadar faction, that does not take away its rarity or the achievement you have of having one.
Yeah, I mean, because if Jem'Hadar players get one for free, only Jem'Hadar players get one for free.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're not going to be giving away one to every character.
It will not be an account unlock.
And that free ship might not be your tier 6.
Yeah, I mean,
or it might have different stats.
It could just be a tier 5U ship because it's going to be given to a level 60 character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that'd be interesting because currently the only free ships that we get on any of the other factions are just tier 5 and unupgradable at that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm expecting, but we'll see how this plays out. Setting a new precedent.
I also have the feeling that Jem'Hadar characters will be able to fly cross-faction lockbox ships because it would be silly otherwise.
Oh yes,
of course. I'm kind of suspecting that they'll be able to fly. I'm thinking that there might have more freedom when it comes to ships than the Romulans did. I'm kind of thinking they'll end up going the TOS route because one thing I don't think they'll keep doing moving forward, because this is where I was kind of thinking like they're probably not going to do a new faction like this, is that if they create a new faction, they're going to have to supply that with a new ship every single release. So that increases their workload by 33%. If they're making it an endgame faction like the Romulans, that they'll have to have their own, every time they do a multi-faction release, that's increasing their workload by 33% for the ship artists. So if they're willing to do that, great. But I'm kind of thinking there might be a little bit more going on with how the Jem'Hadar faction will ultimately integrate. It might be a little bit more like the TOS faction.
Because they obviously don't.
I thought of that this is an opportunity for them to use canon designs that we have currently had no reason to use in STO before. Examples of which include, the non-Dominion ships that were in the Gamma Quadrant. Because there actually were several different races in the Gamma Quadrant with interesting ships that we have not seen in STO yet.
Yeah.
Like the Karma.
Dosai might have some interesting stuff.
Well, there was one specific ship that was from a race that we have encountered in the game as duty officers. Only as duty officers so far, but that could change at any time.
Hunter?
Toss?
Wadi.
Oh.
The Wadi ship they had was an interesting looking one. Yes, it was a modification of a studio model they created for a different purpose, but whatever.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's one of those things with ships. We just don't know how this is going to play out. There's going to be new ships coming, but what the availability is going to be questionable. Because we know it's a Dominion faction coming out.
Well, we don't really. What we know is that
no. On 10
Jem'Hadar
forward,
faction.
On 10 forward, they said the Jem'Hadar's faction origin was Dominion.
Origin, yes.
Its origin is Dominion. So that doesn't necessarily mean it'll stay Dominion.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
why I'm saying, people might be assuming that we'll get other Dominion species. I'm not going to assume that at this point.
Yeah,
I would love to have them. I would love to have them.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff with there's so many precedents Cryptic could sort of go with that we really don't have any firm details besides what's specifically announced, because every single thing basically comes down to there's multiple ways that can go about doing it. And even for example, there's 6 missions coming out for the new expansion. That's everything, including multi-faction. None of those missions may be exclusive to the Jem'Hadar. They may not have their own story arc. What they could do is that those 6 missions, from a Jem'Hadar perspective, could be an introduction. It's just they have different dialogue and maybe even different objectives, like the start of the 2800 arc, where they're just doing things in a slightly different way and for slightly different reasons. So
I think that we may have already seen the moment where the Jem'Hadar faction player character enters the story. Namely, the part where Odo hails Deep Space Nine and says, "I need to talk to you about something."
Yeah, and the first mission could be we go to DS9 and we interact with just the characters from either the Alliance perspective or the Jem'Hadar's perspective, and that's everyone's first go with this. So the Jem'Hadar may not have.
I suspect that it might actually start before that. We'll maybe have 1 mission or 2 missions that show what is going on the other side of the wormhole that leads to the Dominion coming through right at the right time in Scylla and Charybdis.
Yeah,
and then that's where Jem'Hadar players sort of join the main world of the game.
They could also tell that story through a cutscene.
Potentially,
So it's one of those things. There are just so many different ways to go about doing this. It's really interesting, but it's definitely, this is probably the time to exercise the most caution, as people are starting to set expectations, and that could hurt your experience starting off in the expansion. It's you're expecting one thing and all of a sudden you get something different. It's well, why wasn't it like this? Because you think it was promised, or you interpret it that way. It's just that's where rage comes in.
We can talk about some things that we do know.
They should have Foundry access.
Yes, they should have Foundry access, and I believe Zero is going to work on getting us some doors in the Gamma Quadrant, because there will be sector space in the Gamma Quadrant.
And of course, we got to throw in that we'd like to have any customization options they get for species. So maybe another Jem'Hadar tab, because making our own custom Jem'Hadar would be a really nice thing.
They were quite praising the art that they're going to be using for the new playable Jem'Hadar. They said it's not going to be like the Jem'Hadar that we've had in game before. It'll be better.
They've made it newer and better.
Yes.
And
customizable.
And customizable, yes. What they talked about was, I don't think, going back and hooking up that Jem'Hadar buff you can get from the 2800 series for this customization is on the table exactly, but your captain and your bridge officers from the Jem'Hadar faction will be customizable.
It may end up being like the Reman bridge officer from Cutting the Cord.
Yeah.
That guy has a unique costume that you actually don't have as a Reman. You really can't duplicate his costume exactly as a Reman, because he has that weird cape thing that isn't a playable option as far as I know. You can almost duplicate it. Anyway, though, he has that costume and always has that costume no matter what. Even if you're a Romulan Republic player, you still can't customize his costume.
So let's see. One of the other big things coming with this expansion is a level cap increase to level 65.
Woo.
This does not include a new ship tier or any kind of an upgraded system. However, they did say there will be some sort of progression system that's different from what we've had so far.
Two separate things.
Two separate things, but they haven't given any details about it yet. So I don't know. It might involve ships. It might involve your captain.
The progression system that they talked about, I do want to separate this from the level 65 discussion. It's not a simple leveling system, so it's probably it's going to be something modular like specs, most likely. Yeah. So the level 65 will come with certain incentives, and it will affect your stats. Those stats that scale with your level. So I think HP, but the one they said was weapon damage.
Now it doesn't give you skill points for your skill point system, but it does give you spec points.
It will give you spec points, and so there's going to be some stuff going on with the level 65 increase, and they also said on 10 Forward Stream that they're looking at doing more in future and using this as kind of a template. So allowing characters to have a little bit more progression, scaling them up a little bit more, but in a very controlled way that won't include tier 7.
Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, your stats increase with each level normally, as we do now. So they ought to, as we get up to 65.
Yeah, so that's going to
also,
be that
Forticus made an amusing joke where they asked what the XP curve was going to be like, and then he did this thing where he held his hand up, and then it's like, all right, here's the XP curve. Here's what it gets from 50 to 60, and did this really sharp angle, and then when he says okay, here's what it goes from 60 to 61, and then held his hand up straight, and then it's and here's what it's like from 61 to 65, and turned his hand around backwards.
Yeah.
So but it should be said that is a joke.
That is a joke.
Because after that he's like, nah, really. Okay, what it actually is it's going to be a smooth leveling curve. It's not actually going to be a drastic increase in XP.
No, he said basically if you play the story episodes, you'll get to 65.
Or
he actually said something to the effect that you will probably get either enough to go from 60 to 65 just from playing the new story missions, or you will get almost enough.
Yeah. So the one thing to note here is that the progression is linear from the increase you see from going from 58 to 59 to 59 to 60. So you will have to do a little bit more per level, but it's certainly not going to be a grind. It's incidental. It's going to be part of just playing through the new expansion.
It is not like Delta Rising.
No. Everyone was quick to point that out. Zero was just like, no, we're not doing that again.
Well, and actually it was my question that prompted this when we were in the chat room on the live stream. And then Zero said, we did learn our lessons from that.
Well, yeah. I mean, with Delta Rising, I'm not sure they actually seriously figured out how long it would take someone to get that much XP. I mean, your average players, I don't know. It's one of those things you just kind of look at it and scratch your head and you're just like, what were they thinking?
The other thing.
I think we're about to say the same thing, so go ahead.
Yeah. So the other thing to note too is that even though we're going to 65, there is no new rank title associated with this. We are still going to be Fleet Admiral, Dahar Master, as our limit.
Yeah, he actually specifically stated that we're not going to get a new rank title until we get to level 70, which will probably not be for a few years.
Yeah. Which, of course, when we get to level 70, it'd be God Emperor or something like that.
Pretty much. Fleet Admiral is the highest rank in the Navy.
Yes. I am still in the camp that says, when we get to level 70, let's do something story-wise that gets us busted back to captain.
And they joked about that too. I'd be all for that. I mean, doing a story thing that we finally get busted back down to captain, someone actually looks at the books and is like, Quinn, what are you doing with this lieutenant? It's not even like you did anything.
Why did you promote this lieutenant all the way up to Fleet Admiral in 2 years?
So it's not even just part of a like you don't do anything wrong. It's just bookkeeping catches up with Admiral Quinn. Oh, why are we doing that as a Foundry mission? Come on.
The bookkeeping department finally gets around to auditing Admiral Quinn's actions over the past couple of years.
To be honest, though, as many foreign dignitaries as you've met over the course of your career in Star Trek Online, from an in-universe perspective, that idea seems unlikely.
Well, in any case, that's a long time away, level 70.
Yeah.
Let's see. So what else we got? Let's see. We mentioned that we will have Gamma Quadrant, and it will have some sort of sector space battle zone.
Yes.
Which we don't really know what form that will take. Apparently, it's been in heavy playtesting all throughout last week, if not before. So, Kale said he's basically been playing it every day.
Yeah, and he's really excited to get it to us.
I believe the phrase he used with it was iterative testing, as in the devs throw together a new build that they've tweaked, and it's like, okay, try this out and see how this works.
Yep, so he's been spending a lot of time with it, and again, he is very excited to get it to us. Because,
although I personally I prefer the ground battle zones. I hope we get a new one at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons other than it just being ground that the Dyson ground zone is the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
It's also
it does have some of the best rewards, that's for sure.
It's got some great rewards, but it also is fun.
It's fun, yeah.
I mean, you're fighting cyborg raptors with mortars strapped to them. Come on.
But it's also more expansive than any of the others, because I mean the space ones tend to feel a little limited in scope. Because I mean, you've got like
they're technically larger. It's just that there's just less to do in them.
Yeah, and then the Cabali's Adventure Zone was
that one didn't work quite as well.
Yeah,
that was different from a battle zone.
Yeah, because it had a different structure, different objectives, and different sort of zone mechanics.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Kobali Adventure Zone works a lot the way that the open map works in Champions Online, where you have this region, you have a bunch of things you can do in the region. There are other players who may or may not be helping do those things, or maybe they're just there and doing something else and getting in your way. You never know.
Yeah, it's very traditional MMO-y, so it's sort of as close as Star Trek Online gets to the WoW, Terra, Secret World style format of how you typically make a MMORPG.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that's going to be a new format, because it's not going to be its traditional space battle zone. It's got something new going on, and we'll have to find out what those details are for that one. But it will be part of should be part of the Gamma Quadrant, so that should be fun.
So let's see, what else are we getting? We are the interior revamp of Deep Space Nine. They were reluctant to talk anything about that, but it's sort of obvious from the background of some of the screenshots.
Yeah.
It's like, how you have things like Odo's office, which we never had before. So, clearly.
And they had it as the background for 10 Forward. And it was just, they just sort of like, no, we're not doing anything like that. And then they just looked behind them. And then they just kind of kept going.
Yeah. The background they had as their main background for the entire live stream was a image of Quark's bar that does not look the same as the one currently in game.
We never had a staircase.
It had a giant ramp. Let's see. I might have missed this note, but we have on our list of things, there's a new queue.
Uh-huh.
Was that in the blog?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's one of those things that they mentioned that there's a new thing coming, but all they mentioned was that there's a new thing coming.
Yeah.
So there's probably going to be a new reputation that comes out. It's just we don't know what it is yet, and it's probably going to be tied into this queue.
Yeah. So we'll be seeing what comes of that. But yeah, we've got no other details. It's just notable that it's only one new queue. Not 3, just 1.
Interesting.
So far.
Well, one new queue is shipping with Victory is Life. It's not that only one queue has been announced. This is what they said was coming with the expansion. More may follow, but we're definitely not like... We're not.
Well, not
like,
to mention everything is
certain...
also subject to change. So they could add more for the launch if they want. If they get it done in time. Who knows?
Yeah. So on this one though, it's just probably don't expect the usual 3 mix, but the sector battle zone is probably going to compensate a lot.
Let's see, and then we did mention the new progression system, which we don't really know anything about.
Nope. We just know it's something new. Borticus really wanted to talk about it, but he couldn't. So that's it.
He also mentioned that it's something that players are expected to take months to complete. Or something along those lines.
You're not going to
which is consistent with a lot of the stuff that they've added. So
yeah, it's kind of like it's something you're going to be tweaking a lot. So it's not just like sort of you get through it and you're done. So it's not going to be a simple leveling system. It's going to be something that you can modify in some way. You play around with. So
long before the specialization system came out, I always thought you should do kind of like what they do in the Old Republic, which is advanced classes. So you take your main your class and then you branch it off into 2 very specific ones. And the player has to choose, and it's a permanent choice. So, like for science officers, I thought maybe you should go as medical or research, and you would have to choose, and it would be a permanent choice. So that would expand it, and suddenly you have 6 classes for your game instead of 3.
Well, one thing someone suggested was that maybe it might be a sort of limited ability to customize ships, but I don't know. It's just one of those things that players on the forums were spitballing as to what the new abilities might be.
Oh, I was doing that on Twitter the other day. I suggested that, instead of doing T7 ships and, having any issues with, players being mad that they have to rebuy their ships, do some sort of thing where your ship becomes customizable. You buy a token for Zen, and then that token allows you to say, change around the BOF seating or something like that.
Or I think that's probably not going to fall under the a progression system. That would just be a new system.
Yeah, I suspect that's not this.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking more along the lines of it might be a little bit more like an expanded ship mastery system, where your ship now has a level, and it basically may be skill progression that allows you to customize what you get out of ship mastery. That's kind of my idea for what it might be, that they expand that system out so you now are dealing something that's very analogous to player skills, but on a ship basis. So you're able to tweak it, like have a little bit more hull points, a little bit more turn rate, a little bit more crit damage, crit chance, something like that.
So a skill tree for ships.
Yes.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. All right, so overall thoughts on what we've seen so far from the next expansion. What do you guys think?
I'm excited.
Lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
A whole lot of things we still don't know.
Playable Jem'Hadar. I mean, that's something I've wanted since the game launched.
It's something I really didn't think was coming, because I thought they were going to do an alternating strategy. So this one would basically be like Delta Rising. But it seems like they're using Agents of Yesterday more as a blueprint for how to do expansions moving forward. So I'm really excited, because it's like, whoa, wait a minute, I wasn't anticipating this. And I've actually got a good character idea in mind for Jem'Hadar character. It's like, okay, I'm sold.
I mean, you may have noticed how I'm logged in as a Vorta character, so
Yeah,
and
one of
isn't the character where I made an alien and later, after creating the alien, decided to make it the Vorta. I actually made her a Vorta to start out with, and then just left her that way.
I had one for a long time that was like that. So one of the things that we don't know, and that they have specifically said they're not going to talk about yet, is any other races that might come with that Jem'Hadar faction. Obviously, people would like to have, playable Vorta. People would like to have playable Changelings and Cardassians, because, of course, they're affiliated with the Dominion, or have been. We don't know if any of that's coming. I don't know about you guys, but I'd like to have all of the above. But, it's not up to me.
Yeah, it really depends on what they have the time for, what they have the priorities for, what they imagine for the Jem'Hadar faction. Like, it is technically possible it could really just be a Jem'Hadar faction. Mm-hmm. We don't think it's likely, but it's just worth noting that we don't have any specific information yet. So.
One of you guys did have a good idea, though, that, what if the, playable Cardassians were added to all of the factions as a, the next sort of perk for lifetime subscribers.
Yeah, and then the Cardassian ships could then be the, if they are added for all factions, the Cardassian ships could be the equivalent of like 31st century ships. Mm-hmm. In the Agents of Yesterday, it's like you get a Cardassian ship and it's available for all factions. That'd be pretty fun and pretty compelling too.
Part of the reason why I suspected that is because of the fact that when you look at when they added the Gamma Quadrant duty officers, which species of duty officer was cross-faction? Well, only Cardassians. Wadi were allied with the KDF. Pharasans, well, actually, those are not actually Gamma Quadrant race, but
Vorta and Jem'Hadar are also part of that. They're also cross-faction.
Right, but they're actual Gamma Quadrant races too. They're not an Alpha or Beta Quadrant race. The only one of the Alpha and Beta Quadrant races that was cross-faction was the Cardassians.
Well, the Karma were Gamma Quadrant, weren't they?
They were refugees. They're one of the races that are like, the Dominions annexed our home, so we need to find a new home, blah, blah, blah. At least I think that's who they were.
The Karma were, it was that episode where Quark and the Traitor were on the ship that was named after the species, and they had to defuse a torpedo. They had an active trading network and were careful to avoid conflict with the Dominion because they weren't in that situation yet. They were an independent species.
The Karma were actually members of the Dominion.
Yeah. Were they actually members? I know they were affiliated.
I'm fairly certain they were members.
All right. Yeah, but they were Gamma Quadrant. The Docile and the Wadi were too.
And that does bring up an interesting issue, which is, we don't necessarily know all the races that are members of the Dominion.
Yeah.
The Wadi, all we really know about their political status is that they live in the Gamma Quadrant. It was never said whether they were members of the Dominion, but the way they acted, it seemed like they had nothing to worry about. So, hard to say.
Yeah.
That never came up in the episode, literally.
Could it also be that the writers hadn't yet come up with a Dominion or figured out what they were?
No, they had seeded a few little references here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Even in season 1.
The Docile, for example, are a race that was on more or less friendly terms with the Dominion. And part of the reason why Quark was talking to the Docile was someone asked him to acquire a ridiculous amount of Tulaberry wine. And apparently, while the Docile were trading partners with the Dominion, they weren't a full member or something, because they did like independent trading on their own, or I don't know. Maybe they were like a vassal state of the Dominion or something, where they're left alone to their own devices as long as they obey the founders. Who knows? That was never clarified either.
So one thing that's also been the subject of speculation is sort of, story-wise, how are they going to do the Jem'Hadar? Obviously the Jem'Hadar that we're familiar with from the shows are, soldiers first and foremost, and, obeying the founders in all things. So is that the kind of Jem'Hadar that we're going to be playing? That's the question. What is the Dominion like these days? I would personally, I guess that the Dominion is. I keep calling it the kinder and gentler Dominion because of Odo's influence.
Yeah, I mean, also, you see that in Stowe, the actual Dominion has never done anything particularly ruthless or aggressive.
No, they did.
They help us out.
No, they did. They totally did. When we went into the Gamma Quadrant,
asking you to kill what's her face.
yeah, asking us to blow up a Ferengi just for crossing their territory was pretty Old Dominion of them.
A little bit.
And it was
Actually,
definitely
Aaron actually made a good point with that one, though, because of the fact that this particular Ferengi didn't accidentally wander into their territory.
But
she'd apparently been stealing from them for years.
But you're asking a Federation officer, if you're playing a Federation, to commit to capital punishment. I mean, that definitely is.
It's potentially.
Yeah, but
they could remove that from the episode.
Well,
if you
the one
refuse to do it, Aaron's like, "Oh, fine, be that way," and continues the mission anyways.
I don't think personally that the Cryptic's going to make the Dominion uncomplicated. I think there's still going to be resistance within the Dominion to the kindler, happier way.
Maybe Aaron's just
political.
old-fashioned.
Yeah, it could just be Aaron's a jerk.
Aaron's a jerk. I mean, it could be that.
Well,
so I think
I kind of got the impression that if you hadn't shown up at that moment, Aaron would have already blown her out of space for the assorted crimes that he'd mentioned.
Yeah, and he deferred it to you to get a good sense for how the Federation or the Romulans or the Klingons are going to act. It was very, very Old Dominion of them to be basically putting us in a psychological situation that tested how we were interacting.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think Odo is going to be definitely kindler, gentler Dominion. I don't think the entire Dominion is going to be like that because their political system was essentially based on, I mean, just in the basic fact of having the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta and some of the tactics they used, I don't think that's going to go completely away. There's going to be progress made, but it's not going to be complete progress because I think that'd be kind of antithetical to the Star Trek universe to be able to just jump at once to the Dominion essentially being another Federation.
No,
I don't think they're not going to
do that either.
To be honest, the Dominion was always a sort of like a dark mirror of the Federation as it was, because the founders did not actually make a habit of eradicating races that resisted them.
They did do terrible things to them, though.
Yes, but they preferred to annex them through force or gentle persuasion, either one.
And if something got a little too much, they had no qualms with obliterating planets. Just look at Wayun's planning regarding Earth.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that wasn't an option that they considered unconscionable, but it was very low down on their list of things they were willing to do. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work, so I guess we could just blow up their homeworld.
Well, it was more of the fence that they're just like, it's more trouble than it's worth, and it's going to play to our psychological advantage. So there were so few scruples at that point where they could slide just as easily to that extreme as an intermediate solution of actually working through, like, basically just working through a diplomatic channel.
And see, I think you're going to see progress away from that sort of thing.
Yeah,
from that
definitely
attitude,
progress away,
but not 100% progress.
No.
Plus, I also kind of got the sense that the founders were a bit of absentee leadership. I mean, they would come in occasionally and tell everybody what to do, but they, for the until the war, they really didn't bother to micromanage. So they would kind of just give general orders and let the Vorta sort it out.
This is true.
But
I mean,
that kind of
to
fits,
a large
though.
extent, that the Vorta would have a list of things they were supposed to do, and they would eventually turn in the results of what they did, and then
And the
maybe
founders,
one of the founders,
by
would
and
talk
large,
to them.
didn't care how they did it.
Yeah, and that just kind of
Actually,
goes
you know
along
what?
with it, though.
I just thought of something. One thing that's been hinted several times is that most Vorta have never seen a founder in person, which says a lot about how hands off the Dominion really is in terms of the like day-to-day operations of individual things.
Well, and that could be something that has changed under Odo's influence. The founders could take a more active role, and hopefully for the better. But I was telling somebody that, if it were me and if I were writing it, one of the things I would do, because it's almost 40 years later, and because we know that the lifespan of Jem'Hadar is less than that, generally speaking.
20 at the longest.
Yeah.
Well,
what I would do is
kind of hinted that the short lifespan was mostly because they got shot before then.
Yeah.
Some of it's that, and I think some of it's probably intentional control on the part of the founders. I think there's time for, again, under Odo's influence, for them to have re-engineered the Jem'Hadar a little bit. Maybe given them a little more free will, given them a little more, so they don't have to be just soldiers, and that way it sort of justifies our player characters also being able to be science and engineering.
Well, because they specifically stated in the live stream that a newly created Jem'Hadar character will have a choice of profession, science, tactical, engineering, the same as all the others, and their starter gear will be based on that.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say though is that it could this could be something general, or another thing they could do for the start of the faction is that you're basically Odo's protege, that he's trying as basically a one-on-one exercise to give you more free will, give you more liberty. And how he involves you, basically, he puts you in this situation, but it's a fish out of water and character development type story where your character is not accustomed to that. They're not bred into this new system, is that Odo's trying to push you into it. Because that gives you a lot more sort of agency motivation, because it's like you're developing. You're not just arriving as this new Jem'Hadar. You're starting where we know Jem'Hadar started, but it's through Odo's influence that you become more.
We have seen, however, in the game and in the TV shows that Jem'Hadar do have a rather strong willpower already. So, just look at Karu Khan.
Yeah, we do. We do get a lot of that sense that the Jem'Hadar are actually, more intelligent and are more paying attention than they let on.
Yeah, so I could see that basically Odo is kind of running through another experiment like he did with the Jem'Hadar he effectively adopted. And he could basically be running through that scenario again with the player character.
Could be.
So that raises the question, though, is are we still addicted to white?
They hinted that there might be a white mechanic, but we don't have any details yet.
Yeah,
there might be something.
A Ketracel white ground device that has always had the option to use it on players. It's just that there have been no players that are Jem'Hadar yet.
Yeah, there was a little bit of hemming and hawing on the live stream on this subject.
There was.
So there might be Ketracel white use, and that might be a new ground mechanic, or even a space mechanic, because you are, still going to be captaining a ship, and that could potentially factor into your captain abilities. Like you use Ketracel white and then sort of reduce your cooldown time, something like that.
It could be something akin to the singularity mechanic that Romulan ships have. It's like, a secondary resource that you can use some of. You might run out of.
What would be fun is that if it's a reverse singularity mechanic, where it basically is that you have this meter that ticks up, and it's your white withdrawal. So your stats go down as long as it's sort of going up, and you have to keep using white in order to keep that bar down. I mean, probably not, but it would just be funny.
The current Ketracel white device has as its tool tab, if consumed by a non-Jem'Hadar, minus 40% all damage for 1 minute, minus 40% maximum hit points for 1 minute, reduced movement speed for 10 seconds. If consumed by a Jem'Hadar, plus 10% all damage for 10 minutes, plus 20% max hit points for 10 minutes.
Yeah, but Cryptic can basically do any manner of changes to the Catcher Cell White system.
So they could leave it like that, or they could develop some sort of new system for it.
And from what they were saying on the stream, I think they're developing a new system.
What if we did have like a white system where we kind of had to fill up a meter by consuming Catcher Cell White, but it like unlocked special abilities, for instance, shrouding?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we do see that Jem'Hadar that are low on Catcher Cell White are unable to shroud in the TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's not so much you're debilitated and go crazy if you don't consume white, but filling up that white meter unlocks extra abilities.
Or it could be a story related thing that they don't want to reveal yet, that your Jem'Hadar might have something to do with there was the one renegade Jem'Hadar who somehow was no longer addicted to the white, and they he set off into the jungle and then they never followed up that. So our Jem'Hadar could be in some way story-wise related to that guy.
Quite possibly.
Well, it was pointed out in the TV show that the founders had intentionally genetically engineered the Catcher Cell White into the genetic makeup of the Jem'Hadar as a way to control them.
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't know what Odo may have changed, but even still, the Jem'Hadar have the demonstrated capacity to overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, because the little replicator gizmos that they were using for the production of the Catcher Cell White, let's just say that the Alpha Quadrant Jem'Hadar have had them for decades now.
Well, in any case, I'm sure we will get more info in gradual drips and drabs as we move along towards June, and then at some point I'm sure it will be start having some of it appear on Tribble. So that will be upcoming, and we will of course keep an eye on all of that.
Yay!
But exciting times. So let's talk about what we've been doing, and how about you, Duncan?
I've been working towards the completion of my next Starfleet security mission. So, Shattered Relic. It's coming down to final bits of key dialogue, polishing certain things up, and structuring the last few combat scenarios. So, basically, all the maps are built, and it's basically just completing the last stages of the mission project. So, yeah, that's going to be out sooner rather than later. I don't want to say next week. It might be 2 weeks, depending on how long I want to give myself to test and polish this one off.
Well, don't publish it right before there might be downtime.
No. So yeah, it's also just seeing how that works out too. So yeah.
All right, Mark, how about you?
Honestly, I think that the thing I'm going to be spending most time on in the near future in the Foundry is finishing old projects and upgrading them. I haven't actually started any new projects recently. Like Bavette's Legacy Part 2, I still haven't finished that mission. It's been 6 years now? Yeah.
I have a couple of dozen of those. All right, Dragoon, how about you?
I have been working on the 26th Century pilot, and I am almost... It's been slow going. Maintaining these two timelines is very tricky. But I'm almost to the point where I'm getting to the climax where the Vorgun fires what I've now decided is a trilithium torpedo into the sun, and it's to the point where the two differing storylines have kind of merged for the most part, and so what happens in one is happening in the other, more or less the same. So I can kind of start to combine dialogue and do normal dialogue where it's in the story tab and not strewn about the map. So hopefully that means that I'm not too much further away from getting.
What's funny is that if you do it right, the player won't have a clue.
Well, that's the plan.
About how complicated some of it is and how simple the rest of it is.
And as soon as I get this first map down, we're going to publish it so that people can playtest it. Because I want to get feedback on make sure everything's working properly, because you cannot predict how people will actually react to a mission versus how you think they'll react. I mean, there will still be some stuff like polishing dialogue and whatnot, but at the very least, that'll kind of start getting some feedback on that.
Yeah, you always have the situation where people will notice something about the mission as you published it, and you're like, wait a second, why didn't I think of that? Oh well.
And the other big thing I did was on whim, and because there was a double XP weekend, I started leveling up my my Starfleet Dragoons character, which I think we have talked about on the show before. I know I talked a ton about it on Twitter. And just kind of the whole concept behind this military division I made up. And so I'd made the character, and then I took it one step further and made an actual fleet for the Starfleet Fleet Dragoons.
Yeah. Well, I of course, being me, started a new character just to be in your fleet.
Your token sentiment is appreciated.
Yes. I'm figuring, being Dragoons, sort of a light cavalry style regiment was, what they were. So I'm at the moment figuring on flying an escort of some sort.
Yeah. So
but it's only level 30, so I'm not sure yet, and I'm waiting to see if anything interesting comes out from Cryptic new. So
made it to level 30? Didn't you start that character yesterday?
It's double XP. I got to tell you now. Okay, so there's a really easy way to level, and it's not exploiting anything. There's these DOF assignments that came in some of the lockboxes that reward ridiculous amounts of XP. Unfortunately, they are very expensive right now. They went up from about 2 million for each one to about 5 million. So I can only afford enough to get me to level 31. So
honestly, duty officer assignments, if you know which ones to do and where to look for them, it's actually a rather fast way to gain levels.
Oh yeah, but these are even more. You get a level or two per assignment with these things under normal circumstances, and of course now it's bonus XP. So
have you been doing the holodeck performance of Hamlet mission that you have to talk to your ship's operations officer about by going inside your bridge?
I have not.
That one gives massive XP if it crits.
I'll check that out.
But anyway, the console.
If anyone is kind of intrigued by the idea of the Starfleet Dragoons and wants to throw a character into the fleet, they are welcome to just send me a PM. I don't know how seriously I should take this fleet. At the moment, it's just kind of a vanity fleet, but hey, if people are interested in it, maybe I'll throw up some project and we'll actually try and level something.
Well, we need to get these Starfleet Dragoons into a Foundry mission so we can tell their story.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that's what got me to thinking about all the other things you could do, because you could build a Foundry map that is the base starbase that the Starfleet Dragoons are based out of, and have it filled with stuff like gear recommendations and tips for leveling and just all this useful stuff. I mean, that's a whole other area of exploration of the Foundry. Yes,
it is.
Fleet support.
And I do know of some fleets who have created sort of RP maps for themselves.
Yeah, that's what Admiral Aaron's Invictus was originally designed as, and then it ballooned out into a full mission.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see. Mark, you played through a mission this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
The mission's name is The House of Kelet, first part. The author is Royal ST5. Starting point is at the Eridon Nebula. This is an interesting mission because it was written by someone who is not a native English speaker, so a lot of the dialogue is let's go with challenging to understand. Because, well, again, not a native English speaker, but he seems to have had a somewhat limited vocabulary, so certain parts of it are kind of weird. Well, for an example, the mission name, the way he spelled it out in game, he put House of Kelet with house with a lowercase letter, and first part he put an apostrophe between the 1 and the ST. Yeah, that sort of thing goes through the entire mission. There are certain parts of it. There's certain parts of it where I didn't fully understand the story because I was trying to figure out what he meant to say, because what he actually said didn't make sense. But, you know. Okay, the basic gist of the story is that Admiral Quinn has decided that it's time for Starfleet to go back to, you know, like exploring the borders of the Federation, yada, yada, yada. And he sends you to the Eridon Nebula to have a look around because haven't had all that many Federation ships wandering around in the Eridon Nebula recently. Well, when you get there, you detect a supernova. You don't ever see it, though, which is interesting because a group of Klingons has been causing trouble in the area and set up some sort of sensor masking field so that when you warp in, you encounter a damaged Klingon ship, a bunch of angry Klingons from the House of Kelet who try to kill you for unknown reasons, and the masking field that they have set up there is explained as the reason why you cannot see the supernova event. I don't understand why they would set it up that way, but whatever. It continues on with talking to some of the Klingon Admiralty and eventually Jem'Hadar himself that the House of Kelet were believed by the Klingon High Council to have been eradicated a long time ago. I don't think he ever says in the story how long ago, but a long time ago. But here you are fighting them. Also, you end up with the Romulans getting involved because the House of Kelet has apparently attempted to annex a system that is currently claimed by the Romulan Republic, which results in Datan deciding to talk to the Federation about it personally because, oh yeah, did I mention this was a Federation mission? It is. Yeah. All in all, the story is interesting. I don't fully understand it, and I think it's only in part due to the limited English language skills of the person who wrote it. I think he just forgot to explain certain parts of the story completely. Like, one, why is it that Jem'Hadar and Datan feel the need to make a multi-empire task force to deal with the House of Kelet, other than the fact that no one knows where they live? Because they've been presumed dead for however long, and all of their known assets have been seized. I don't know. But anyways, like I said, though, earlier, it's a part 1, so I'm assuming that he's planning to explain more of the story as he continues with the series, because I am kind of intrigued as to why Jem'Hadar would have such great loathing for the House of Kelet that he would agree to work with Datan in order to get rid of them.
Certainly an opportunity for an interesting backstory there.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing I just thought of about the mission is that I forgot to make a picture of it, but one thing I noticed is that he used certain assets that I know he placed on the map, that they're Klingon consoles, but certain parts of the console are glowing white, and I'm not sure if that's a bug or not. Because usually with the Klingon consoles, they have the red lettering. Well, some of them were this wasn't lettering that was glowing white, but it was the how they have like the red piping stuff. Some of those stuff on these consoles was glowing white, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to. Oh well.
I'm not sure. You bring up an interesting point though, which is capitalization. That's something that varies between languages and varies between writing styles in English. I in my work life as a journalist, I use Associated Press style, which actually doesn't capitalize near as much stuff as what your normal, and I forget what the name of it is, the writing style that they teach you in high school and college. And it has, slightly different comma usage and that sort of thing. So, but the easiest way to figure out if you should capitalize something is in the Foundry, I think, is to probably look at stuff on Memory Alpha, and if they've got something capitalized there, they might as well capitalize it. But things like, if you're talking about Klingon houses, you're saying the house of something, that's a proper name, and I would go ahead and capitalize the H.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that that the easiest rule of thumb is it a proper noun? If it is a proper noun, capitalize it always. If not, maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely not capitalized is if it is the name of a type of item. Although, in some cases, those get capitalized too, so it's somewhat iffy.
One of the interesting ones is species names. So we don't capitalize human. We do capitalize Terran. Sometimes. I've seen it not capitalized. We always capitalize Vulcan in Klingon.
I've gone to capitalizing human at all times now.
Well,
because, it makes the most sense in context.
An interesting thing with that, though, is that the word human doesn't necessarily get used as the name of the species. Personally, if I'm using it as like a name of a specific species, I'll typically capitalize it. But in other uses, maybe not. To be honest, though, capitalization rules sometimes make it more clear what you're talking about because of, like I said, is that there are multiple ways that things can be phrased. And
and sometimes, depending on how things are phrased, is how they're capitalized as well.
It changes the meaning, just like rearranging things just a tiny bit.
Like Bloodleaf is saying, ship types tend to be capitalized, like battle cruiser. However, if you're just talking about in general battle cruisers, I don't think you need to capitalize it. But if you're talking about a specific battle cruiser, then maybe you should.
It's one of those things in STO is that when you're looking at a ship title name, it's going to be in a descriptor or a mission objective, not so much in dialogue. So, like right now, I opened up my character profile, alien male. That's capitalized.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to refer to an alien male in dialogue, it would not be capitalized. So, it'd definitely be on the watch out for like the context for where you see capitalization, because that does definitely change it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, because in this case, though, it's when it's used as a specific game term, it's essentially treated as a proper noun, even though under normal circumstances it wouldn't be, because it's referring to one specific aspect of the game, whereas general usage is not.
But even still, when you're having different aspects of the game, sometimes it's capitalized, like leveling system. I'm not going to capitalize that. But if it's going to be something like the Gronkar system, I'm going to capitalize that. So
course,
it does.
It's proper noun.
Yeah, so it's definitely one of those things. It varies. Language is complicated. And if you're having some questions, definitely look online and just see through common usage how certain concepts are capitalized. If you're just looking at something that's just in language, I mean, certainly you can look up guides on the use of language and in various contexts. If you're looking at it from the recent college perspective, it's MLA format that is typically being taught now.
MLA, that's what I was trying to remember.
Yeah, so if you just go MLA format capitalization, I mean, you're going to find something to help you out there. If you're looking for something specific on Stowe, definitely go to Memory Alpha, see how they're talking about it, or even Gamepedia if you're not sure if it's something exclusive to Stowe. Go for that. Species name, in science, it's always capitalized. So it's one of those things, it's just like, even if I'm saying red-winged blackbird, it's capitalized. So for me, I capitalize human, because it's one of those things too where it's like, if you don't capitalize, it's definitely from a human language perspective, which you actually can't guarantee in the Foundry since someone can be playing as a Vulcan.
Well, and it's interesting you mention animal species names, because that's something that's a little bit different in Associated Press style versus, I think, other styles.
Yeah.
For instance, I would not, if I was writing in a news story, I would not capitalize red-winged blackbird. But I would capitalize something that has, like Irish setter. I would capitalize the word Irish because that's a proper name. So it's a little complicated, like all this stuff. So and I'm constantly having to try and figure all this stuff out, for a living. So it's we're not just being really nitpicky here. This is stuff that actually comes up in real life too.
English is so complicated.
It is a little bit.
Well,
yes.
I mean, think about it this way: how many different possible sentences are there that you can write using only 10 words?
Too many. Is the only answer to that question. I think probably part of the reason English is so complicated is because it's an amalgam of a ton of different languages.
Not to mention has several countries actively using it
in different ways.
Yeah, and it does vary too for the countries. Is it a first or second language? Most English speakers now speak it as a second language across the planet, and that definitely affects the development of language because now it has so many local variations and dialects.
All right, so let's see. What else we got here on topic? Okay, so we know that a goal of theirs is to make it so that these Jem'Hadar players will be able to use the Foundry. So, how do we go about making a mission for a Jem'Hadar player?
It depends on what species they've got.
Well, and it also depends a little bit on how Cryptic is going to write them in the first place. A little bit.
Yeah,
so,
true.
But that's from a writing perspective. But from a mechanics perspective, that was part of the reason why I said, "Hey, let's do this show in my Jem'Hadar bridge," because we do have this map for the Foundry, and B, it gives you an idea of the style of Jem'Hadar interiors, and look at how it's not purple.
Yep. Also, when they were discussing this on the live stream, they mentioned that the new player faction will have a new UI, which will be, well, okay. You see how there is on the wall that little engineering systems layout? Apparently, it's going to look a lot like that for the game UI.
Yeah. But it's sort of funny because when you hear Dominion, you think purple.
Because really, the Dominion logo is purple.
The Dominion logo is purple. The ships are a little bit purple. But really, the interiors are not.
Well, kind of like when they were stuck on the ship, when they were basically in a siege situation with the Jem'Hadar, that ship was quite purple. But
and that was sort of your emergency lighting.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it can be more purple at times than others. They definitely have more variation in the color scheme.
I was looking through some screenshots earlier from the shows, and actually this is pretty accurate for the normal lighting Jem'Hadar bridge. So I think flat gray walls is something we can rather easily do.
Yep.
Or flat tan, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, this is gray.
The back.
And if I remember right, don't we have this particular bridge in the Foundry already?
We do, but obviously that it's a bit limiting to try and do anything on any of those bridges.
It is small, yes.
So if you were going to try and make some sort of, Dominion style interior, obviously you can start with the gray walls. You can do like the back of the bar asset, which is always good for a little bit of a gray wall. And we have. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, with how reflective these walls are, I would use I think it's Foundation Block 03.
Is that reflective?
Well, it's the black metal reflective one. So it's gray. It's pretty uniform if you can just sort of line it up right. It'll have basically creases at sections, but you can definitely work around that, or just kind of just incorporate that into the build. But it has the right color and material reflection to what this is. So
yeah, and if you look at the floor, you see red carpet highlights. Well, we've got red carpet. I know, because we've been doing all sorts of
around the wall.
Yeah.
And it's got a stippling effect, and we do have a more finely stippled, but I mean, we got a floor that would work. Enough. Yeah.
You put pillars in different places, and I think you could come up with something. Now, what we don't have is consoles.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it's one of the things that I have wanted most, and that would add a lot of flair to bridges, is the ability to set faction appropriate consoles on things, because most of the faction appropriate consoles we do not have as placeable assets.
Yep. So that is a challenge to overcome. However, if you're making a mission for a Jem'Hadar player, what you could just do is just not set any of it on a Dominion ship. Just have them go out somewhere.
Yeah.
And do something. And so, the question will be, do what?
For example, if it's aggressive negotiations, you can always go to their bridge and to yell at them in person, just to be extra intimidating.
Well, it's one of those things. It's just that when you're setting a mission, like building a mission normally, I mean, you don't often set things on the player's own ship. So I don't think the approach is really going to change that much with how you structure mission from the get-go to accommodate Jem'Hadar player. It's really going to be in the implementation of the character and how you're actually writing the response variables and how the plot is progressing and how other characters are treating them. So as far as that goes, I think just playing around with some of the character types that we saw in the Dominion is going to be kind of the way to go. And it's basically going to be Klingons without a sense of humor, but a greater sense of irony. I mean, that's kind of one way to think about it. It's just you've got a warrior culture, but at the same time, they are much more serious in Worf, but they do have a greater sense of awareness of what's going on. And they kind of take some humor in that, but they're not funny. So they can appreciate the sense of the irony in a situation, but at the same time be very kind of straightforward about it.
Yeah, they're not laughing much at all.
They'll recognize the joke, they just won't laugh at it. So that's kind of the way to think about it. And so it's not like you're going to have to explain humor to them. No, they get the joke. They're not laughing. So it's definitely going to be a change of style. But just by going back, rewatching DS9, and eventually playing the cryptic missions, I think is going to be probably the best way for players to really get a handle on how to write for this new faction. Because we're probably not going to have too many missions to set the tempo. I mean, we'll have some, but I mean, with a maximum of 6 in the season, I mean, there's not going to be a whole as much opportunity to get a sense of the character as we do for the Klingons, the Romulans, and the Federation. So this might be a time, especially if you're looking at writing some Jem'Hadar content, to go back and rewatch DS9.
Well, one thing that just occurred to me is that an easy analogy for the style of humor is like with writing Dirty Harry jokes. I mean, because yes, he makes jokes. No one ever laughs at them.
I just did. If you're looking for one overriding character trait about the Jem'Hadar, for Klingons, it's honor, that sort of thing. For Jem'Hadar, I would say it's duty.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is the one overriding character trait. Even the ones that were rebellious in some way, they saw it as fulfilling their duties to the Dominion and to the Founders. And I think modern Jem'Hadar will still have that in some way.
As Karakhan put it, the Founders have turned their backs on us, but we go into battle to reclaim our honor anyways. I forget the exact wording. It was something like that.
Something like that.
Although I think it's worth also branching out into other types of personality traits, because we did have that one Jem'Hadar, which was kind of a little childlike, the one who was interacting with Dax a whole lot, who do have sort of innate curiosity.
Yeah.
And also kind of that sense of pride with, like, you know, if we make it past, 14, they're considered honored elders.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of culture and a little bit of ritual to them. And they can have a little bit of fun. I mean, kind of in the sort of the childlike way. I like not giggling, but at the same time, just sort of that simple curiosity.
Mm-hmm. And you can do that in their interactions with, like Federation or Klingon characters or Romulan characters, because, I get the sense that, this is not going to be an antagonistic faction. Of course, they're going to be good guys. They're going to be allied with the Feds and the Klingons. We're all going to be friends, kumbaya and all that. So, these Jem'Hadar, they're going to be interacting with Federation characters, and they're not going to be here to conquer them. So they're just going to be talking to them. So they might know nothing about them. And it could be interesting.
Oh, you're just wanting me to write optional dialogue with Jem'Hadar.
Optional romance dialogue.
So I just wanted to...
As someone who has played a Vorta character for a long time, I have thought through in my head what a member of the Dominion would actually say in a bunch of situations where the actual, cryptic writers never thought about it.
It could be as simple as something like, we have a pool table in the Foundry, so one of them comes across some Federation players playing pool. It would have no idea what was going on.
Because it's just sort of combat practice. So you're focusing on aim and accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a manual dexterity exercise.
Or they think it's
it's a physics lesson.
Or what if they think it could be a console and you're somehow inputting commands. So they
I don't even think Jem'Hadar would be that dumb.
Well, I mean, it's an alien ship, so they think it's this. They see the balls in their relative location as like, okay, you're doing a battle plan and you're moving things around and you're simulating how two different groups are interacting with each other, and they can construct an elaborate scenario based on the misunderstanding that this has no practical purpose whatsoever. So they can think it's
somewhere in the mission. You're going to actually have to set up a scene where they actually use the pool table to plan out a battle.
Funny thing is, actually,
that would be an example of Chekhov's gun, by the way.
Yeah, and the just what else you can do is basically just do standard sort of cultural stuff with practices. Like one thing you could just easily do is just the concept of personal space, because that's very culturally ingrained. And just Jem'Hadar, just start a conversation. If you want to start an optional dialogue, it's this Jem'Hadar standing 2 feet away from a character, and they have to try to explain this concept.
To be honest, I suspect that Jem'Hadar do have a concept of personal space in the way they interact with superior officers, because I can't imagine that a Vorta overseer would be happy having his Jem'Hadar first literally breathing down his neck.
I just want to throw out for any Foundry authors kind of looking to get a better sense of the Jem'Hadar. The following Deep Space Nine episodes are really good reference. To the Death, Hippocratic Oath, Rocks and Shoals, and One Little Ship.
Yep, those are good ones.
I kind of avoid One Little Ship every time I go through.
I love that episode. It's so silly, and I mean, just so nothing that you would ever do in a live action show, or nothing you ever should do, and yet somehow it kind of works.
But it has some close interactions with Jem'Hadar in it.
It does, yes.
Well, one that was interesting was the episode with what was her name? Kilana. Because she was Cisco and his group had somehow captured a wrecked ship that had an injured changeling in it, and Kikilana was trying to secure the release of the changeling into their custody. And thing is, though, is that Kilana is the only representative of the Dominion who isn't a Jem'Hadar in the episode, who actually says something. Because the founder, in this case, they are not in good enough condition to talk to anyone. And the Vorta Overseer, who was on the ship, well, they use a tricorder to scan the ship to figure out where her remains were located, and you never actually see her remains. There's like, oh, we found little bits and pieces of her splattered all over the ceiling. Yeah, it was that kind of shipwreck.
So the one thing I'll say is that if we're talking like including Vorta, then there's going to be another whole set of episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you got everything from
the Vorta are a whole different animal.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to writing an Iggy Pop style Vorta. Because
Eris.
Yes.
That's another favorite episode of mine.
Yeah, I love that. Like, as much as I really like Wayun, I like that Vorta just a little bit better with how dry he is. And at the same time,
and his interactions with Ishka are just hilarious.
And it's funny because you just have this really just crazy dichotomy with this one just ruthless jerk. And at the same time, he's willing to try just the lotion.
Well, see, because the thing with him is that he's ruthless because he thinks that it's the best way to get the job done.
Yeah, naturally.
Not because he actually likes it. If he thinks that something else is the best way to get the job done, he does that.
And that just is part of his character in this betrayal. It's just so dry that he can kind of go through this moment of curiosity. And it's kind of like, like when Quark makes the comments like, oh, what was it? Like, oh, brothers or mothers, And he says, no, I really don't. I was cloned. And it's just kind of, he's not quite robotic in the sense of Data, but he is this mechanical entity, but at the same time is able to have those moments of character reflection.
Because I
have to wonder if part of that weird mindset is because of the fact that he's a clone. He knows he's a clone, and one thing they mentioned in the show is that no two Vorta, even if they're clones of the same guy, are exactly the same.
Yeah, you have the variation in Wayuns. And then the Vorta they captured, too, had a very different personality, and you can also surmise that it was very much, in part, due to his experiences. That
Kevon,
yeah.
That guy was amusing.
Yeah, but at the same time, a completely different character to Eris.
So because you guys said the C word, it set off something in my mind. Okay, so when you're writing a group of Jem'Hadar, what you probably want to do is develop distinctive characteristics among them to set themselves apart from each other, rather than just being a bunch of
muscle-bound idiots,
clone soldiers. And one I just today started watching or doing a rewatch of the Clone Wars, Star Wars cartoon show.
Oh, and that was hilarious because they took a bunch of guys who are literally, all of them are clones of Jango Fett. And they, made them all distinctly different. I mean, One of them, all it was a facial tattoo that made him look different than the others. But some of them, it was like hairstyles, and they're just like their general demeanor made them look different.
Personalities. I mean, they really gave them personalities, and they become distinctive characters all on their own. Even though they're all voiced by the same person, they all look alike basically, And it's a great example of what you should do if you're writing groups of Jem'Hadar.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because another example for the Vorta is that just look at the way Aaron and Loris play off of each other in the Star Trek Online missions. They don't act the same. I mean, Loris is polite and respectful most of the time, but she also has a kind of like a mischievous side to her, whereas Aaron is more, I don't want to say by the book, but he's less he doesn't find humor in his own actions, while Loris does. I mean,
The
because
Vorta do have a sense of humor.
I mean, because like with Loris, like the way she introduces herself is she finds a sort of like an ironic humor in her own actions. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, haha, sucks to be you. I run Deep Space Nine now.
And also just like at the end, she's just like, oh yeah, and oh, what was his face? I'm kind of blanking on names right now. It's the male. It's Aaron.
Aaron.
Yeah, and she, at the end,
what she says is like, oh, and I'm here to express fawning sycophancy and something or other on Aaron's behalf. Actually, he's sulking, but I thought it would be more amusing this way. Something like that.
Just kind of digging the knife in there.
Yeah.
Presumably, Aaron was listening to the transmission, so that he can hear what Loris is saying.
He's just rolling
like
his eyes.
Aaron in the background, just like silently fuming,
or just rolling his eyes. Maybe it's just he's got a little bit of a. I mean, depending on how far these clone lines go, that they could just be. Yeah, they could just have just a little bit of a rivalry and a little bit of just digging it in. So,
well, see, one of the interesting things with Loris, though, is that it's never explained which. Well, actually, hold on a second. In Loris's reappearance in the new episode, they do add a version number to Loris, but it's not clear why this version number is different. And that's something I'm hoping they'll elaborate on in the future.
Mm-hmm. It is something you could do in your own Foundry missions, develop a Vorta character and, think about which clone are they, which number, and are there reasons for that? And how would they be different from their other clones?
Well, I did actually write a Vorta character that was a unique individual for one of my missions because, well, this was the Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant mission where you meet this interesting individual by the name of Endless, who the founders can't clone because she's a Borg. Yeah.
Yeah,
how exactly you ended up with a Borg Vorta who is now de-assimilated and serving the founders? Well, I didn't actually go through all of that. Although I did put in as like this little like an optional thing you can find out if you poke around in the mission that Endless isn't actually from this universe, and that no Vorta by that name has been cloned in this universe ever, and that Endless's genetic structure is anomalous. Although, she's actually loyal to the founders, they just like, okay, so our alternate universe versions created this person because we have no idea.
So, talking about how to make missions of this sort, I've been thinking about the next Foundry Challenge. And, I mean, first off, I want to make a much more simple prompt without a lot of background to it, like we have done with the previous ones. That makes it a little bit more open, maybe a little bit less intimidating for some authors, although potentially more intimidating for others. I know, I've heard some authors say, I can't work on a vague prompt. I need to know where I'm going, but it's a balance.
Well, yeah, we just did 26th century anthology, so
yeah,
we definitely want to go for something a little bit different this time. Yeah. The one question I did have for this one is that, are we planning on this one being the challenge that occurs sometime around Victoria's life, or is this going to be sometime?
This is what I'm thinking. Yeah, is whatever downtime we get for Victoria's life, whenever that ends, we launch the challenge.
Okay, so this particular challenge. So this would probably be the one we want to coordinate a little bit with Crypticon to actually make this Dominion themed.
Well, and there was some hint that somebody official was thinking along the lines of a Foundry challenge.
Oh no, they said
didn't Kale actually come out and say in the live stream that he wanted to do a Foundry challenge?
Yes, and he bothered Zero about it, and that was kind of as far as they got with it. And
at least on
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
so,
I didn't take it as anything definite, so I went ahead and I put something on to try and solicit some suggestions on the Foundry forums, for something that might tie in with Victory of His Life, whether it might be, make a mission in the Gamma Quadrant, or, make a mission for Jem'Hadar characters or something like that.
Yeah.
But, I figured we can probably be a little more clever than those.
Yeah, so
a mission for Jem'Hadar characters might be slightly problematic, as they will most likely have a red or blue choice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could still make it we would just put like an anthology tag on it.
Yeah.
Like as people do with TOS characters.
Or like the ROM tag.
Or the ROM tag. So yeah, I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, we've been making Romulan
I was
missions
just
for a long time that
mentioning
have to be either one or the other.
We can't make them that are like actual purple faction missions. They have to be either red or blue and playable by.
That's very, very, very likely how it will work.
And then, but a Foundry author could also just, publish 2 missions and do a port. So if they really feel so inclined to make,
or you make it so that you're not making a mission specifically for Jem'Hadar characters, you just something Gamma Quadrant related.
Yeah, and my idea on that one, because if we launch this before the anthology, we're going to or before the expansion, we're going to be a little bit more limited. But if we're going to wait for after downtime and after people play through the expansion, we could definitely do something that's just, make a mission about the Alliance returning to the Gamma Quadrant and interacting with the species there. And that's a lot of new ground and a lot of potential. And if we do this after we get back from Victory is Life, then authors will certainly be able to have a handle on it. So
yeah, I mean, they're we'll know everything that happens, story wise.
Yeah.
So,
and then if
or
we
at least,
wanted to
up to where they leave it off.
Yeah, and then if we did something before, then we would just do something that basically launched off from wherever season 14.5 leaves off, and we would just make a Dominion mission in the Alpha, Beta, or Delta Quadrant, similar to the 100th, where the Dominion is simply around and interacting with species in this part of the galaxy. So we wouldn't tie it directly into...
Or, I think if I were going to do one before Victory is Life launches, I would say, let's make it not necessarily exclusively Dominion themed. Let's make it DS9 themed, pick up anything from DS9.
There we go.
Which is a lot of things, obviously.
Yeah. We would... Yeah, and... that would be kind of tricky on where to start it because we don't have DS9 as a Foundry door. Except we do have. Well, no, actually, no.
We have doors on DS9.
We have doors on DS9. I just remembered that. It's like, wait, no, we can
inside DS9. But not on the sector DS9. Space map.
Yeah. So it can just basically designate just to make it easy.
We have a bunch. We don't necessarily need to specify a start point.
Yeah. It might help just to help people find all the missions that are out there. Well, no, they don't have the top 3 system, so it's still going to be a little... Yeah, we don't need to specify.
What if you were to do something like on DS9, no one goes to level 36. What is on level 36?
Then use the assets from the old DS9 shutdown map to make a trashed version of a DS9 sub-level that no one bothers going into.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something like that. I mean, I was just thinking, for when we get the Gamma Quadrant and have doors there, of a prompt is like, invent a new race that's in the Gamma Quadrant and make a mission about them.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Lots of us obviously have done things like that before. We've invented our own new races and that sort of thing. So it's something we Foundry authors like to do.
I could actually go and elaborate on that one race that I already created, which is the Wreck Arthur. Because what I did explain about this race is that, one, the Dominion doesn't like them. They're basically in a state of indefinite conflict with the Dominion, and because the two of them shoot at each other whenever they see each other. And the Wreck Arthur have a preference for swarm tactics over force, And that's about as far as I went. Oh yeah, also the MacArthur technology is capable of detecting transwarp signatures, and for some strange reason, they have a moth to a candle flame reaction to detecting transwarp signatures.
The way I
did not write dialogue for any MacArthur character ever, so their actual individual personalities are completely unexplored.
Well, and I've been thinking about doing a Dominion mission now. Just basically starting off on a new series. And ideally, this would be something I would make after Starfleet Security and maybe one other project. But what I was thinking about doing is basically a similar situation to that one planet that was basically very much under the boot heel of the Dominion, that was suffering the genetically engineered plague.
The Quickening.
And
Teplin Blight.
Yes, and basically looking at how the Dominion isn't completely happy, and it has everything to do with the structure of the Dominion and how basically the Vorta are able to carry out their objectives. So it almost comes down to, with the Vorta competing amongst themselves for status within the Dominion, they're still going to be quite ruthless to an indigenous population. And that was basically the mission, and especially putting it in the context of a Jem'Hadar who had basically broken in combat and basically seen what he had become, and really got that moment of perspective of what the Jem'Hadar are compared to another civilization, because he's developing associations with that species, he's interacting with them a lot. Then he has to go fight them, and then kind of comes back from that. This is just sort of the background of his character. He's a little bit changed, a little bit unhinged, and ultimately turns against the Dominion. So, and then it's at the same time you got a Vorta superior who's doing basically the sort of the evil plotting, but in the sense of like a Foundation general being a villain versus someone who's an outright antagonist. So like a Bel Rios type who is trying to increase the authority of the Dominion for the sake of the Founders, but also his own career. But he's running into...
You see a little bit of that when you look at the interplay between Loris and Aeron, because the way Loris interacts with Aeron, it's kind of like two people trying to show each other up.
Yeah, so I was thinking about doing that as a duality, and then also having the Jem'Hadar angle on it to sort of shine a light on the Dominion and just in total the biological engineering going on there and the personal reaction that someone would have against that situation. The Dominion coming to a point where they're starting to acknowledge this, but not quite, not in full. And then on top of this, it's got a Republic crew in addition to the player on the scene as well. So they're pushing the situation on in sometimes in opposition, but also in concert with the player. So you have this other perspective as well. And the Republic pushing on the Dominion as something that happens as part of the mission. So this is, that's sort of what I was thinking on what to do after Starfleet Security, and I kind of have a full cast set up already. And it's kind of like just working with the Republic crew is something I've been working on for a while. And it's kind of already based on my Delta recruit, my TOS recruit. And then the Jem'Hadar would actually just be my the character I make for the Jem'Hadar faction. So it's like, well, this actually makes a whole lot of sense and brings a lot of stuff that I've been working on together. And gives some good opportunities to basically make something that's part Terry Pratchett's Discworld with like a Sam Vimes type Romulan. And then on top of that, put it with some Foundation-style political intrigue. So yeah, you can do a lot of stuff.
Bringing together every sci-fi literary franchise.
Yes, ever. And I can do that now. Because I'm kind of getting to that point where I'm able to bring a lot of stuff together, and that's actually my Starfleet Security mission right now. It's like, wait a minute.
I mean, it's kind of like the old saying goes, is that when you use your imagination, the limit is your imagination.
But it's, and for me, it's pushing myself as a writer to be able to handle this type of complexity. And it's kind of something I just generally recommend to authors. Always try to push yourself in some way on a project. If you're just doing it as something that's serial, it's like, well, you're not getting as much out of it as you can. And you might find that in doing something a little bit more ambitious, at least from a creative standpoint, you might find that there's more you can do in the Foundry. It just opens up new doors, new mission possibilities. And for me, I'm considering this as a whole new series. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the what we can do. I don't know if I would incorporate this as part of a Foundry challenge, but it's at least a good example of what someone could do if our prompt is just do something in the Gamma Quadrant, or make a new species, or do something about like the Alliance interacting with the Dominion in the Gamma Quadrant, or interacting with another species.
Well, we're not necessarily limited to choosing one and only one challenge theme. We could do one challenge, then do another challenge a few months later or so.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And I do want to make sure that we're not going to overlap with anything that Cryptic decides to do, because if they want to do an official Foundry challenge, that would be fantastic.
I think they like us doing the admin, because they would have to sort of develop some kind of process for judging and evaluating. And we've been kind of bankable on that, so I'd like us to just assume that we would administer something and coordinate with Cryptic.
Sure.
Which is ironic, because our administration process is based off of what Brandflake's established.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, this way Kale
carbon copied, really.
Yeah. But yeah, at least this way Kales, who does have a full-time job, doesn't have to just develop some new process. He can just basically put it on us, and then we just run it. So yeah, we'll continue the conversation and definitely reach out to Cryptical, but more see what other input they have. I did sort of tweet Zero and Kale about it, and they liked the post, but they didn't provide any specific feedback yet. So we'll see closer feedback.
We're ways out anyway. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time before they decide what they want to do. And also, I'm really kind of interested just to see where the story goes, simply because of the fact that where the Cryptic story goes will have a big impact on what we do for the challenge.
Although I think
potentially, yeah.
Although I think regardless, I'm probably going to still make the mission that I just specified as is, because it
Maybe
is
just like massage a few of the details into.
I think you can fit it in just fine. Plus, I mean, there's nothing that ever said that a Foundry mission has to acknowledge any cryptic missions as canon.
No,
this is true.
You can do whatever you want.
I've actually seen people write Foundry missions that were, shall we say, completely outside the universe.
Yep.
In fairness, we may have made fun of
you can take every story beat the Cryptic's done and chuck it out the window.
Where they were attempting to make a recreation of a scene from one of the Star Wars movies in the Foundry. I think it was like the trench run from when they were blowing up the first Death Star, making that as in a Foundry mission.
Yeah.
You can totally do that with the Borg pieces. For sure.
Yeah, well, that's what they did. Is that they took a bunch of the huge Borg cubes, stuck them down, and then made the player fly their ship down the length of it.
Oh gosh, I have a project that I never finished that would be super appropriate for. Damn. Now I'm gonna have to do that someday. But for today, I think that's a good place to leave it. So, Dragoon, if you want to put up our contact info.
Okay. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at foundryroundtab, where we'll post news and when shows go up and when we live stream. Dragoon can be reached specifically at Dragoon1701. Duncan can be reached at Corganups_SSF. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right, and don't forget, Starbase UGC is back up and operational. So anyone with content relating to the Foundry should get their posting permissions over there. And if you have any questions on how to do that, I'm sure we can help you figure it out. So that'll do it for us this evening. So we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.